Hello, YouTube. Active Acid on roids. Kryptonite for conservatives. I'm off my roids, off my rocker, and on the warpath. Here we go. Just got off work recently. Full as hell. Ate too damn much. Uh, while watching a video on YouTube, I got an idea in my head. Got to do a rant before the idea slips away. Um, you know how whenever you enter a conversation, well, more like an argument over the internet with a bunch of right-wing trolls, how there's always this one token moderate Republican. Sometimes, well, not really all the time, but sometimes a token moderate Republican will chime in and say, "Oh, but not all of us are like that. Not all of us are like that. Why are you painting with such a broad brush? No, no," in an attempt to defame liberals to that try to fight full force against the conservative movement. They try to get us to back off, so to speak, even though they never actually try to turn that shit against their own little group. And I think about this situation, and I've run into this situation online plenty of times. Heck, I've ran into it a few times in real life offline, and and it never ceases to amaze me how these moderate Republicans are nowhere to be found when their side does something wrong. Someone on their side, someone who's a far right Tea Party nut job, Austriocon, just crazy. He can go out. He can go out and do a million fucking things. But that moderate Republican, he's nowhere to be found when it comes to outing these kinds of people. He's never there to decry this kind of situation. He's never really there to honestly go after them as stridently as he does the other side. But they'll chime in. If you go online and you get into an argument, or if you get into an argument offline with a few people, or even a light discussion, and the issue of Austrian economics and the craziness thereof, or the history of privatization and how it's ruined the third world and increasingly the first world, or the John Birch Society and the militia movement, and how there's been a massive upswing in domestic terrorism by gun nuts in this country since the mid 90s. Of course, it died off a little bit during the Bush years, but that's only because they had one of their guys in office. But then they automatically, you get where I'm coming with this. Where are those Lincoln Chafee moderate Republicans that always seem to chime in when it's convenient for them to say that we liberals are painting with a broad brush, when we rightfully label the modern right for what it really is, a product of the conservative movement's distilling, of the right wing's distilling, to reach that point to where their entire base is just that, the John Birch Society. I mean, this is my question to the moderate Republicans, the so-called moderates, to the moderate right. Why won't any of the moderate rightists, the moderate right, do something about the extreme right? Why won't they do anything to stop the far right, the crazy right? And that's just it, though. That's just it. There's a reason why they will not do anything to stop the crazy right. It's called a primary. Moderate Republicans saw what happened to Lincoln Chafee and other moderate Republicans outside of New England. They saw what happened when they challenged the hardcore crazy base of the Republican Party, the very distilled center of the core of the Republican Party, of the Republican Party's electoral base. They saw what happened when they go up against them to try to control They're kind of reactionary garbage from within the party. They get primaried out of office if they're a public figure, or they suffer the consequences of being marginalized by the rest of the American right. But they always serve that one good purpose of chiming in when a liberal decides to take the right to task. My reply to the entire, my answer to the entire moderate right, the entire so-called center right, if it really exists, which I don't really think it does, to tell you the truth. I think the center right thing is just something that many extreme rightists wear to give them some kind of trapping, a very thinly veiled attempt at creating the illusion that they're somehow objective in the face of extremism, when they're really just as John Birch crazy, Ayn Rand as the right wing libertarian / Christian reconstructionist / neocon crowd. You know, they're just as crazy right wing as the whole identity theology William Potter Gale groupie crowd. They sympathize with them if they're not with them, at the very least, because they're so damn slow to do anything about them. And in one of my earlier videos, Identity Theology, entitled Identity Theology, Fascism, and a little bit of Alex Jones, you know, I already, you know, I actually took a moment to take mainstream conservatives to task in addressing this by saying that many of the mainstream conservatives that were credited with keeping the crazies out of the movement were themselves not that different from the fucking crazies. Again, William F. Buckley Jr. All these modern day apologists for that Leo Straussian piece of shit. All of the apologists conveniently omit that this guy was every bit as strident about supporting right-wing dictatorships and apartheid and segregation and Jim Crow in the South as any of his John Birchian counterparts, cousins were. Here's, again, I reiterate, let me start all over by saying that this is my answer to the so-called moderate right, the so-called centrist right. Because I've gone after the extreme right enough. I think it's time to just go after the center right and take them to task for not doing their fucking job. Because God knows we've had to do their fucking job enough. You know, maybe my answer is, maybe if the moderate right, maybe if the center right, if they even exist, the center right, if they're even a real force in American politics, which I don't really think they are, unless of course you count the modern day Democratic Party's adoption of Rahm Emanuel and Milton Friedman's economic policies since the 1980s. We on the left, we on the real left, the civil activists, the progressives, the liberals, the social democracy advocates. Oh man. We have to do the job of taking the far right to task, because you assholes in the center right are completely ineffective in doing it. You're nowhere to be found when shit goes wrong. You act as apologists when things get really out of hand. You try to spin things around to somehow shield your Care Bear cousins on the far right from whatever damage, you know, any kind of social backlash they might have to endure from this, from any of their craziness. And you only show up when you have to provide some kind of lukewarm defense for your far-right militant cousins. Who else is going to do your job? Because you sure as hell will not. If you can't keep your animals in line, we'll keep them in line. So, again, to any of these so-called center-right people who have this just who think that somehow they have a dog in this fight when in reality all they've done is provide some kind of foot in the door for the far right to do whatever the fuck they want, almost entirely unchallenged or half challenged in many cases. Think about that for a second. Why would we on the actual left, the real left, give you guys in the center right any kind of credibility when you show no political courage whatsoever? You show no political courage because you need these guys on the far right just to be able to accomplish anything yourselves. And you're too damn afraid to piss them off because you know that primary season could be right around the fucking corner. And you'll stab us in the back just to make sure that you can cozy up to them instead of telling them what they need to hear. You just tell them what they want to hear. You basically play Rupert Murdoch every fucking time you get a chance. Grow some fucking balls and actually do your fucking civic duty and protect the rest of America from these wild animals that you have caged in your backyard. I mean, the lunatics have taken over the asylum already. The most you could do is act as good little men in white coats and put the nets on these assholes and put them back in their straitjackets. Just show them back to their fucking rooms. Okay? And that's all I have to say to the moderate right, the centrist right. You have a job, you have a sacred duty to protect the rest of us from your crazy jackasses, from your Care Bear cousins, from your David Dukes, from your William Potter Gales, from your Tea Party Ron Pauls. You have a sacred duty to protect us from these clowns every bit as much as we have a sacred duty to protect everyone from these clowns. But you haven't done it. You haven't done it because there wasn't no money in it for you. You haven't done it because there was no political clout in it for you. Grow some fucking balls. You talk about how you have morals compared to them. Show it. Prove that you have some fucking morals and that there's some tangible difference between you and the far right crusty cretins of this country. I'm Active Aslan Roids. Peace out, everybody.